Tomorrow is Election Day in three key races that we're keeping an eye on. Some dueling gubernatorial campaign events this hour in Virginia. Former President Obama showed up there this weekend to support Democratic nominee Abigail Spanberger. And in New York City, Obama stopped short of giving frontrunner Zohran Mamdani an official endorsement. Oh, I don't know if it was really short of it. He was like, dude, if you need me, I'm there. I'm paraphrasing. But he did offer to support Mamdani and be a sounding board for the Democrat socialists, who in the past has called to defund the police, holds strong anti-Israel views, and aligns himself with a group that wants to change how our democracy operates. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here with my co-hosts Emily Campagno and Kayleigh McEnany. Also joining us, Kayleigh McGee-White, former Fox News contributor, current, and David Webb, also a Fox News contributor. Obama's support for the socialist candidate, and you know because of his policies I also call him a communist, comes as the latest Fox News polling shows Mamdani's lead has narrowed. He's lost 5 points since October, which ended Friday, with both former Governor Andrew Cuomo and Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa gaining ground. But his campaign is still predicting a huge win as young voters continue to coalesce around him, even those outside the Big Apple. But they can't vote in this race. But anyway, a 26-year-old woman in Mississippi says, quote, I would like to believe one day there could be a Zohran Mamdani for Gulfport, Mississippi. But I don't think that's ever going to happen, at least not in my lifetime. But it gives me hope that it can happen in other places across the country, end of quote. The Free Press, with a detailed report about the group Mamdani belongs to, writing, quote, the Democrat Socialists of America is more radical than ever and winning, end of quote. The article argues, today the DSA is run by activists enamored with the authoritarian left. The DSA is about to win the biggest election in its history at the very moment that the party itself has been hijacked by illiberal revolutionaries who display hammers and sickles in their social media. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries with this when asked about Zohran Mamdani's reach.
Do you see Mamdani as the future of the Democratic Party?
No, I think the future of the Democratic Party is going to fall, as far as we're concerned, relative to the House Democratic Caucus and members who are doing a great work all across the country.
Hakeem Jeffries was asked this morning if you're the future of the Democratic Party. He said no.
Good to know.
Do you have a response?
No, I'm focused on the next 2 days.
David.
It's not whether Hakeem Jeffries thinks he's the future of the party. The fact is the ideology is the future of the party. We're talking a lot about New York City, obviously, Zohran Mamdani, who's, by the way, his policy prescriptions are communist. Let's not mess around with that. But then you have Katie Wilson in Seattle. Katie Wilson, who is likely to win the Seattle mayor's race, is his ideological twin. Then you look at Michelle Wu in Boston. Then you look at Brandon Johnson, an avowed socialist. What you see is a control of the party, not just under the DSA, but the other group is the Working Families Party, which is much more established, working in over 24 states across the nation. And just to give people an example of how effective there are, in New York alone as a state, there are 469 candidates under the Working Families Party umbrella. They are moving socialism, pseudo-communism under another name, forward by winning local seats, county seats, whatever it is, and working their way up the system. This is a real threat to the American way of life, and Barack Obama's fundamental transformation, he's back in because now his vision, which he laid out, is becoming even more obvious in some areas.
So it's interesting. What does this phrase mean to you, Kayleigh? Let me be a sounding board to you. Almost like an also ran Mamdani, you got this, call me.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Obama and many of the other establishment Democratic leaders almost seem to be in wait-and-see mode. They're not necessarily publicly embracing Mamdani yet, but not because they disagree with his ideological worldview or his policies. In fact, I'd argue that Obama himself helped move the country very close to what Mamdani's vision for New York City is. But they're waiting to publicly embrace what they've been pushing secretly. And if Mamdani wins in New York City, I think you're going to start to see that very public embrace of Mamdani, of the DSA. And they're going to use the excuse that young voters want it. And you see this in New York City about how young voters my age have coalesced around Mamdani. Democrats are going to use that as an excuse to push the party even further to the left because they're going to argue that that's what the future of the country wants. But there are a lot of Gen Zers who are much wiser than that. New York City has its own problems, but my generation does not endorse Mamdani's worldview, and Democrats should be really careful of doing that themselves.
Yeah, I respect the generational, but we had the voters' voices on last hour, Kayleigh. And what was interesting to me was someone much older than you saying affordability is the issue. She was an independent. The independent behind her agreed. Hands went up. They agree. I mean, so clearly Republicans need to work on this issue of affordability going into the midterms. But what else are you seeing about Mamdani that tells us anything about the midterm elections?
Well, I think the economic trend lines are very good. And I think President Trump is going to be known for ushering in a great economy. So I think that's going to happen. But no doubt, Mamdani has been pushing affordability, trying to closet his socialist views and pushing that line forward. And I would say his pro-Hamas views, too, as we've discussed. But I think when you look at New York City, you got to extend this out nationally to Democrats. This has been a test for every Democrat running for office, every Democrat elected official. And what have we seen? You have the Chuck Schumers who don't come out and proactively endorse. You have that phone call from Obama. You have this kind of reticence to embrace him publicly. But who's spoken out against him proactively? We could probably count on both my hands, maybe even one hand. I mean, when I look at who's proactively come out against him, you've got Cuomo, who's his opponent, who's that old guard Democrat. You've got the person who I had on 2 weeks ago, Josh Gottheimer in New Jersey, who said you belong in the Socialist Party, not the Democratic Party. You have on our airwaves this morning Tom Suozzi, Democrat from New York, who came out against Mamdani. And then you have John Fetterman. Socialism's not the future of my party. We all know how socialism works. But you could count on one hand, two hands maybe, the Democrats who are coming out affirmatively against him. Why is that? The party's in an identity crisis. There are record low favorabilities, the Democratic Party. Not a single Democrat around the nation garners more than 25% as being the leader of the party. They are leaderless, their brand is underwater, and it's very appealing. This guy who winks and smiles, and yes, he does it while talking about socialism, but he's got a brand and he seems hip. He's at the New York City nightclubs. That's what it is. Their attention is drawn to his popularity. So what about socialism? They don't care ideologically where he stands. They're attracted to his brand, and they're in this trying to have it both ways category.
Well, and if you let Hakeem Jeffries and Senator Schumer wear this losing moment in Democrats' history, then when they're gone, you can say, well, we got this now, we'll move forward. So you need a scapegoat, I would imagine, if you're going to try something new. And that's also what this moment can feel like. Emily.
Yeah, something that I find fascinating is you look at Mamdani's, essentially the front runner, who the candidate is that's closest to him, that poses the greatest threat. And it's Andrew Cuomo. And when you align the policies and look at a table and say, all right, what do these guys stand for? Obama aligns closely with Cuomo. Right? They were the ones that were both pushing this. And granted, I'm saying this not as a Democrat, so I'm not saying that it is pragmatic or makes sense in any way. But both of them were pushing this sort of, incremental change, right? Within fiscal responsibility. Sure, they're advocating for the same things like affordability, a great emphasis on health care, LGBTQ rights, climate action, and the like.
Not successful for Cuomo, the health care part.
Exactly. But it was all within the rubric of we're going to make this work with the fiscal responsibility, the economic rubric that we have. We're championing sort of a progressive agenda, but it was within a common sense approach. Again, I use quotes because I don't think it was common sense. But now you have, in contrast, Mamdani that doesn't favor incremental reform. He favors absolute revolution. And it's curious to me because if you really were dedicated to ideology and to policy, then you would think that the former president would say Andrew Cuomo represents the centrist Democratic platform, which is a reasonable, cohesive, and collaborative approach to lifting all boats. But in reality, it's a popularity contest. And the image that they're worried about and the optics that they're worried about isn't that this person is a blatant anti-Semitic and a lot of other things. Oh, no, the worst image would be maybe an aging out, sexual harassment cloud person that is sort of a has-been in a political family rather than representing the future. But it is downright terrifying that they are willing to sacrifice their policies and the heartbeat of the Democrat Party, which would be respect for others, simply for TikTok likes.
Interesting. It's what President Trump, though, has said, Emily. He calls one side a communist and the other side a bad Democrat. I mean,
Yes.
as early as yesterday.
There's a problem in America. We narrow focus on the election of the moment rather than the track of time. If you go back to Barack Obama's early speeches and who he is, he waits for the opportunity for the radical transformation. That's where he got to fundamental transformation, but he began that before the Illinois Senate. We have to do what Democrats do, and what the president even said about China in his interview on CBS, is look at the overall track, the broader picture.
The long game.
Democrats take opportunity, go radical, seem moderate, to your point, but then the radical is always waiting.
So is that what you think he was doing with Kamala Harris? Maybe he thought he had that in her because she seemed rather controllable for the first 106 days.
The word controllable.
The one I
Kamala
said.
Harris didn't have ideas of her own,
Right.
but she could be that useful tool.
I get you.
And this is the problem and I think Curtis Sliwa has actually made this point quite fairly. There's not really a whole lot of daylight between the so-called moderate options like Andrew Cuomo and the Zohran Mamdanis. Rhetorically, there is. But if you look at some of the policies that Mamdani has proposed that we fear the most, things like defunding the police, bail reform, these are policies that Andrew Cuomo himself implemented when he was governor of the state. So they can talk a big talk, but when they get into power, they're all the same.
You know, and Cuomo told us that about a week and a half ago, right? He said, remember, the place where the president never sent in federal troops or anything like that was New York City. He said, I'll hold the same line. He won't send ICE here. He won't. So, yeah, it is interesting.
I will say, though, Andrew Cuomo is not someone who says Hamas should have arms and can't answer that question.
100%.
So
Well,
there
what
is a
he said-
categorical difference
100%.
between Western civilization viewpoints and those who cannot clearly say terrorists shouldn't have weapons.
Only New York City has this dichotomy, and the choice has to be made in less than 24 hours.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.